And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Sliding down to SPD off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Tingle.
343 unfolds to go. Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, or should I say more formally, Kennedy Space Center down here in Florida. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 perched on the historic Launch Complex 39A ahead of yet another Starlink launch this evening. We're sitting just under 1 hour away from the launch of 23 Starlink satellites as part of the Group 6-38 mission. Again, sending more satellites into low Earth orbit today. You know the drill. You love them to see them. We got another Starlink launch tonight. I'm Ian Atkinson. I'll be your host for this evening, but as always with all of our live streams, it's not just me here. I'm joined by the very talented Adrian Bile. Adrian, how's it going here tonight?
Thanks for that introduction. It's going great. Always good to see Starlink from 39A. Always good to see, in general, things launching from 39A. It's always a great pad to see. So I'm looking forward here to see, hopefully, Starlink 6-38 launch in about 56 minutes from now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, like I said, it's a historic launch site. It's not used that often by SpaceX, because you have to go between Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. It's a lot of work to get those going. So it's a bit of a rare treat tonight to see another 39A launch, especially a 39A Starlink launch. Also joining us today down in Florida is Julia Bergeron. Julia, how's it going out there for you tonight?
It's going well. Outside of it's kind of windy part, and Max saying from his position in the field, it's cold. So otherwise, yeah, it's going well. I'm excited to see a rare Starlink launch from 39A, and ready to get this bird in the sky.
Yeah, and Alex, actually speaking on the rarity of Starlinks from 39A, Alex in the back channel is telling us this is the first Starlink launch from 39A since September of last year. And in between that launch and today, there's been 42 SpaceX launches, which it is just a crazy number. It's an incredible cadence they've had. And it's like we said, it's a rare treat. So enjoy the launch from this crazy pad tonight, or crazy important pad tonight, just under 55 minutes away. Now, Adrian, we've been talking a lot about this mission tonight, about Starlink from 39A, about this launch. Can you give us an overview about what's on this launch, what booster is flying, and what can we expect to see in just under 55 minutes from now?
Yeah, hopefully we'll see the launch of the Starlink Group 6-38 mission, which is currently targeting 8:10 p.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A. Right now we are about in the middle of the 4-hour launch window. We saw some delays earlier where they moved a bit into this window, but they still have about 1.5 hours of wiggle room in this window. So that's where we are. The booster for this mission will be B1062, which will fly for an 18th time. And if I'm not totally mistaken, will then tie the record of B1061 with that. So we will see another one that go up to 18, hopefully here. So there we are with that. And also, we, as of now, have another Starlink coming up later today, which is planned from Vandenberg, which would, if they would launch at the times they are right now targeting, there would be a 2 hour and 19 minutes and 20 seconds turnaround between missions, which would also beat the record of SpaceX that they currently have, which is a 2 hour and 54 minutes and 40 seconds between USSF 52 and Starlink 6-36. That's the situation right now. However, that might change with further potentially delays here or Vandenberg. We'll see, because so far this rocket has not entered fueling, and only if it enters fueling, we are really locked into a launch time as of now.
Yes, you mentioned propellant loading. Julie, I have a question for you here. So we're about a little under 20 minutes until propellant loading. What's going on down in Florida? We've been talking about a lot, Julia, that may pose some potential problems for this launch. I know there's a few different things we've been tracking, some that Max is experiencing right now, as well as possibly recovery weather. What are you looking at like there?
Well, midday, I remember typing in our Discord. I don't know how I feel about this launch tonight because we had a front pushing through and it was thick clouds and then it dumped a whole lot of rain. And then by the time my lunch was over, I said, oh, but it's sunny now. The problem with fronts that come through is that also means upper level winds kind of remain unsettled for a little while. And then that very front that came through here actually was going, believe it or not, southeasterly, which means it could possibly be impacting recovery weather as well. So I pulled up the current forecast and it is saying that we have roughly 18-mile-per-hour winds. That's just what the forecast tells us. I honestly do not know what upper level is right now, but as Max says, it's freezing. Now, it doesn't look like that when you look at an app, but you combine wind and the Atlantic, and it kind of gets that moisture and cold mixed together. And the Cape, frankly, has kind of its own weather. So what Max is experiencing on Cape versus what I am on the mainland could be two totally different things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's nighttime too, so you don't have the sun to warm you like you would during daytime. I mean, 60 degrees in the day is much different than 60 degrees at night, as well as 60 degrees in no wind plus 60 degrees in wind. So yeah, very dynamic. How much the weather can change down there. We have a lot of support coming in here already. We have a bunch of gifted memberships coming through. We have let's see, Memar Jono here gifting 1 Red Team membership. Thank you for that. Henry Brown has joined the Pad Rat member guild. So thank you, Henry, my bad. And welcome to the Pad Rat memberships. RC Horseman is gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Sideshow Bob has gifted 1 Red Team membership. Woofy W has gifted 1 Red Team membership. And Richard Cochrane has gifted 5 Red Team memberships. So thank you to all of you for gifting memberships. We're seeing an incredible amount of support just in the, what it's been like, not even 10 minutes we've been live. So thank you everyone for that. And thank you everyone for tuning in as well. Let's see, I'm going to hand this over to you, Adrian. Michael Bertodi here is asking, do we have any direct-to-cell Starlinks flying on this mission? Do we know the status of those? Are we getting any more today, or is it just plain Starlinks?
To our knowledge, this is plain Starlinks. Direct-to-cells are, to my knowledge, right now in Group 7. So we are not expecting any direct-to-cells, to my knowledge, on this mission. And so far, SpaceX, at least on their website, has also not said anything. So we do not expect these are direct-to-cell Starlinks.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Another question. I'm going to send this over to you, Julia. So River Dave here is asking in relation to the landing profile tonight, are we having an RTLS landing? Where's this booster landing? And if so, what's with Starlink RTLS? What's going on with that?
Well, we are not in the Starlink RTLS era yet, shall we say. I'm hoping maybe we get to see that a little bit more this year because they are licensed to be able to do that. But you know what? We've been treated to a lot of our RTLS landing zone landings coming up and already this year. So no complaints really. We are going to be landing on a shortfall of gravitas, roughly 630 kilometers downrange, and that downrange would be our traditional southeasterly trajectory.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Julia. JK Video is coming with a $10 super chat simply saying thank you for your coverage and thank you for your support, JK. Again, this stuff goes a long way. The memberships, the super chats, tips, the merch store, they all go a long way to help us provide coverage like this. We're doing a lot of equipment upgrades, and so everything like this really helps to make these streams even better, day by day, month by month, stream by stream. So thank you, JK, for your support there. Let's see another one here. River Dave, I'm going to send this to you, Adrian. So we mentioned there's a Vandenberg Starlink coming up. Are we going to have a double header stream tonight? What's it looking like for
No.
Vandenberg coverage?
No, we will not. We will not cover the Vandenberg launch later today. That's always coming down also with who's right now available for our folks. But no, we'll cover the Cape today, and then we will make sure that you're get updates on our X account about the mission from Vandy.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a treat to get a Vandenberg coverage because, again, there's like very little areas out there in Vandenberg that have good views. Plus, you have the fog that comes into play. Plus, a lot of our assets are down in Texas or in Florida. And Vandenberg's kind of unfortunately the forgotten launch site, but hopefully that'll change sometime soon. Let's see. Ship 26 here, Ship 26, nice name, saying SpaceX has already delayed 3 hours tonight. How much longer do they have in the window? So, Julia, how much time do you have left in the window tonight?
According to the SpaceX website, we have backup opportunities available until 8:55 p.m.
8:55, or is it?
Oh my gosh, 9:55.
Okay.
I worked all day. You're right.
No, you're
It's
all good.
9:55. Now, if we do get fueling underway, I would assume that means we're going to commit to the T-0 that is listed as 8:10 right now. So we're getting kind of close to that end of window once fueling starts.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, Julia. And then I'm going to go right back here to you, Julia. From Kurt here, they're asking, so this is obviously happening sometime near sunset, but Kurt here is asking, their kid and I are wondering if there's going to be a jellyfish opportunity tonight with this launch. Is it too far from sunset, or do you think we'll actually get one tonight?
Oh, that makes me cry because had we gone at the beginning of the window, we would have had an excellent chance of that. Now we are too far into the window. The sun has well set, which is part of the contributing factors to Max being super cold out there right now.
Yeah, poor Max. Again, he's providing us these live views here tonight. So think warm thoughts for Max out there suffering in the wind there tonight in Florida. All right. One last question. I'm going to move into a bit of an overview of what we're going to see here tonight if the count holds. Quick one here from Cameron. Adrian, are we going to be covering the lift of the Space Shuttle Endeavour tomorrow? I know what Chris B would want to say, but what are we doing in terms of that?
We'll see. Stay tuned.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. So thank you for that question, Cameron. We'll have to stay tuned on that front. That's got me by surprise there. So, one last question, real quick here from Anonymous. They're asking, can SpaceX launch multiple rockets at the same time from different launch sites? I mean, Julia, they could in theory, but do you think logistically that would be a lot to juggle there at once? Like, what are your thoughts on that front?
Well, multiple launch sites as in Cape and or Vandy. Well, the short answer is, could it be done on Cape? Yeah. Well, at least within 15 minutes of each other, probably. I don't know about instantaneous two at the very same time, but I do know that the range can handle basically back-to-back launches. So it's a matter of, can SpaceX's control center and launch teams handle that? As far as adding in another launch from the other side of the coast, boy, I think then that's really more of like an Alex question when we're talking orbital mechanics and colas and potential.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's kind of an Alex question when you get to that, but could you launch basically within 30 minutes, 15 minutes of each other from Cape? That is something the range can support if the launch provider could support it.
Awesome. All right, and one more reminder for everyone: if you have a question regarding tonight's Starlink launch, SpaceX stuff in general, be sure to hit us up in chat with @NASA Spaceflight. We want to go through as many questions as we can. It's a very interactive stream, especially these Starlink ones. It's kind of like lay it back a little bit here. So, real quick before we get into some more questions, we actually got a few more piling up in the queue here. I want to do a quick overview of the countdown we're going to be looking at tonight. So, right now, around T-45, we should have gotten the go from the launch director. I think that is the dragon countdown right there. That's going to be pretty close to what it is today. So at around T minus 38 minutes, we're going to get the go for propellant load. So it's about 5 minutes from now. That Falcon 9 is go for propellant load. Coming up at T minus 35 minutes, so 3 minutes after that go for propellant load, we will begin loading kerosene or RP1 into both stages, followed by liquid oxygen loading into the first stage. That's going to continue for about 20 minutes. We're going to go through the T minus 20 minute vent, which we're going to explain a little bit more as we get closer. And then at T minus 16 minutes, we'll start second stage liquid oxygen loading. We'll have engine chill at T minus 7 minutes, and that will follow us all the way down to T minus 1 minute, which is when a lot of the fun stuff starts to happen. And we'll give you a bit more detailed look through there as we get closer into the count today. But right now, we're sitting just a little under 5 minutes until we should get that go for propellant loading. And if we get that call, then we're going for this launch window. Falcon 9 doesn't really have any hold opportunities after they begin propellant loading, because they're dealing with densified propellants. They're chilled very low, and once you start putting them in the tanks, they are starting to warm up. So I was about to say it's like a ticking time bomb, but you really don't want your rocket to be a bomb. So yeah, that's what we're looking at tonight in terms of a countdown. Going through some more questions here. Let's see. The unqualified gamer. I don't know if we know the answer to this, Julia. I feel like you might be the best one here. But is there a max? Do we know the maximum wind speed before they have to delay or scrub a launch? Is that public, or do we really not know those numbers for that?
I don't think that has been officially discussed or talked about. I mean, it's funny that it can be an absolutely clear day, and here we are talking about weather and winds that could be scrubbing a launch. I mean, sometimes it can even feel like it's absolutely still on the ground, and upper level winds can scrub things. So, unfortunately, no, we don't have a hard answer for that. But and I'm not sure if that's even a proprietary thing, provider to provider, that maybe they don't want others to know.
Yeah, I mean, each rocket is different. So, Falcon 9 is different aerodynamically than an Atlas or a Delta or a New Glenn or even like a small sat launch vehicle like Electron. So, it's going to be affected by wind differently. And also, its structure is different. So, it has a different, failure point in terms of how the wind impacts it and when it would, crumble under high winds. So, it's probably going to be different between each launch vehicle. But, if we're go for propellant load, then it seems like they're comfortable on that front. Julia, I also heard that we have something you wanted to bring up actually about Starlink and its applications in maritime operations. So, can you take it away? What would you want to discuss on that front?
Well, something I learned, and there's a captain I follow on another social media called TikTok. That's one we're not on, believe it or not. But Captain Kate, she's works for Celebrity Cruise Lines, and with cruises being quite the thing around here in Port Canaveral this week, and let's see, we had 5 cruise ships today and 6 cruise ships tomorrow in Port Canaveral. So it's pretty relevant to my area and our tourists. But how much Starlink has changed how crew can connect with loved ones was actually her captain's blog yesterday. And I learned it used to cost you $7 per word to send basically a teletype. And we're talking maybe 15, 20 years ago to send a teletype to your family from the ship. So you had to be very, very picky about those words that you picked. But now they have Starlinks on board their cruise ships, which make it very easy to connect at no additional fee on the cruise ship to your family every day. So not only do we see Starlink being useful, we've seen that stream stabilize when we get those views on the drone ship of the boosters coming back in. A lot of that has to do with that Starlink connectivity being tested on the drone ships. And it's really kind of cool to see that more and more on the cruise ships that leave this very port.
Talking while muted right there. Thank you, Julia. We appreciate that. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. Like out at sea, you have very little kind of communication options out there. Like you have traditional satellite internet, you have your geostationary things, you have like Iridium that you can use. But it's really niche and is not that high throughput that you can get with Starlink. And kind of the flexibility with Starlink really it really allows you to communicate all over the world, and that's kind of what Starlink is meant to do in the first place. So it's really cool to see it being applied in those, more extreme circumstances. We've seen it being applied and used in the Arctic and the Antarctic, in the wilderness now with the direct to cell connectivity that's coming online. So it's really cool to kind of see these applications coming up as Starlink is entering now more, I guess, operational use cases here. Let's see here. Michael Sharon here asking. I actually had to ask Alex in the back channel here. Has SpaceX had enough launches in January to make their total of 144, or it's actually 148 launches during this year? Adrian, I heard you groan.
No, they're like, it's like it was kind of like a scrub heavy January. To
Yeah.
say it like that, we had a lot of delays. Weather was also like, especially like actually on both coasts, weather is not really kind to them right now. So no, they're way behind. It's not even like they're like just a day or two behind. They're actually like, I think the last post I saw was like somewhere close of a pace of like 90 launches right now per year, somewhere in there. But they're definitely not on track right now for 144 or 148, whatever they're right now. However, there should also be said, SpaceX has like the tendency to pick up their cadence over, like, especially closer to the end of the year. That's something they sometimes do. So
And
like it's not over yet.
no, it's not over yet. And weather is kind of the unpredictable here in Florida. Normally this would be our dry season. And it has not been dry. It's been full of subtropical weather, and it's an El Nino year, which normally didn't seem to do a heck of a lot. But boy, this year we're getting the Gulf weather, subtropical weather. So that's kind of throwing a wrench in the plans. And then, later on in just a few months, actually, we go into the actual tropical weather season.
Oof.
And that's highly unpredictable, right? And maybe we'll start seeing more northerly launches at that point, because the southeasterly gets a little sticky. But again, maybe we're not keeping that cadence, but I do want to point out that it is nice to see that maybe we're not experiencing launch fever, and launch fever can lead to things, can lead to mistakes, right? And bad calls, which we're going through that season of remembrance here. So not rushing just to hit a number kind of goes pretty far in my heart, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, Julia, as far as I understand, so I mean, you mentioned El Nino. I mean, up here in Pennsylvania, I think this year already we're like 4 inches of rain ahead of where we should be. I mean, it's been pouring for days straight up here. So I'm sure it's chaotic down there in Florida too. I mean, how is January usually in Florida? Is this really like a kind of messy, bad weather time of year out there?
No, it is not. It is what some people would consider their fall or spring weather, and it's
Oh,
actually normally kind of dry. Like, it would be a good time to be doing uh kind of home fix-up projects in your yard and things like that. And it's been nothing close to predictable, weather-wise, unfortunately. I feel like we get rid of one front and another front's coming, right behind it. So fitting launches in there has got to be frustrating for these Cape teams.
yeesh. All right. Well, that's unfortunate. Um, And yeah, I mean, you mentioned tropical weather's coming up, so it's only going to get worse. And of course, we've had Vandenberg having several scrubs recently. So, I mean, hopefully they'll get back on track as well. But it's going to take a bit of ramping to get up to where SpaceX wants to be this year. Alex says right now, considering where they are, they're on track for about 120 this year, which still far exceeds their record last year of 96. So, I mean, not a shabby number, but not quite the 148 they're really looking for. And also, really quickly before we move on to another question, oh yeah, and Alex did clarify if they launch the last few launches this month, they'll be on track for 120. Another thing that Alex brought up in the back channel, some news that was kind of broken recently, is that, and you mentioned, Julia, that they're using Starlinks on, or Starlink dishes on cruise ships now and more maritime operations. Well, they're going to be going on space operations as well. Falcon 9 will be outfitted with Starlink Starlink dishes coming up on future missions. We don't know exactly when, but SpaceX has either applied for or gotten authorization to install Starlink terminals on board Falcon 9. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that's applied and see if that has any impact on Falcon 9 in general. I mean, it kind of makes sense, they have the constellation up there already. And yeah, Alex did correct me. They did fly Starlink to space on ship 25. So that Starlink terminals have been in space already. So I wanted to bring that up real quick before I moved on to another question. River Dave here. I'm going to give this one back to you, Julia. Sorry, Adrian. I'm giving Julia a few here in a row.
Oh, it's all good. I'm fine.
People have some really great marine asset questions here today, actually. I will say. River Dave here is asking, any word on the status of JRTI? Just read the instructions. What's happening with just read the instructions, Julia?
As far as I know, it is still finishing doing what we think was scheduled maintenance. So it went up to the shipyard, and at first it was 1058 might have done some damage, but honestly, just read the instructions, was looking a little scrappy. And I'm curious to see what she's going to look like when she comes back. Maybe she'll have a trimmed deck, maybe not. I'd assume we're going to be doing a lot of work under the deck just to do some reinforcing, new paint job. Could come back with less containers. It's hard to say, but she's still at the shipyard. And I guess, all of these RTLS landing zone landings have been, very beneficial, at least as far as the at-sea cadence goes, so they can get this work done, because there's no way you're going to get to 120 if your assets at sea are kind of limping a little bit.
Yeah, and hopefully they can put some upgrades on there to make it, turnarounds better, less maintenance between missions. So great things to hear there. Also, speaking of missions, for the mission tonight that we're looking at on screen right now, we have visually confirmed that we are in propellant loading right now. If you look towards the bottom of the first stage, that is kind of visible. You can see a little bit of condensation coming off on the liquid oxygen tank. Again, that's showing us that there is liquid oxygen being loaded into the first stage right now. What should be happening simultaneously right now as well is RP1 loading starting in the second stage and RP1 loading in the first stage. So this is a great indicator that we are, at least SpaceX is trying to go for the first T0 tonight, or I guess the current T0. Of 8:10 p.m. Eastern time. So again, just a little over 30 minutes away. Some great signs there that we are getting into the countdown.
And this now means, just like to recap for everybody, since Falcon 9 doesn't have like any ability to hold in the countdown or like recycle anymore in a quick amount of time, that takes a bit of time and a few hours, we are now locked into this T0. Like there's no wiggle room here anymore. They will either go at that time or they will not go.
Exactly, yeah. I mentioned before, yeah, they have no wiggle room now once they get into propellant loading. I mean, launch vehicles like SLS or Atlas or Delta, because they're not using super chilled propellants like Falcon 9, they're only using like liquid oxygen and plain RP1 or plain liquid hydrogen. They could just keep it in the tanks and keep just refilling it. Whereas with Falcon 9, as it's in the tanks, it's going to be getting warmer and you're going to be losing density on your propellant. So it's very critical that they launch as quick as possible.
One small caveat I have to add here is we have other vehicles that use cryogenic propellants that can hold. Starship.
That's very true, yeah.
Which is like I totally get the reasoning with Falcon 9, but I wonder why Starship has that capability and Falcon 9 doesn't. Because Starship has, to our knowledge, a capability right now, at least in the test they're performing right now, to hold for about 15 minutes. So maybe that comes down to them not looking like super sharp at performance yet. But yeah, that's maybe they are like in a situation where they don't have to look at that yet. Another could be diameter related, because you have more volume versus diameter. So there's different explanations here. And I see Alex saying a similar thing in the back channel, so I'm very happy with that reasoning now.
That's a good point. So it acts as like a thermal sink and it insulates itself because you just have a huge chunk of cold, basically. Another thing that I think of is you mentioned they're not trying to get full performance out of it right now. I mean, Falcon 9, this mission right here, and a lot of missions Falcon 9 flies, are at its limits. Like, this is the most Falcon 9 can do on this kind of mission. Like, you can't put anything more in Falcon 9 and launch it right now. And so you need every bit of propellant there. But with Starship, at least in its current test phase, you don't have payloads on board. You have a lot of extra propellant that you really don't need because it's launching 0 payload when it has the capability of 100 tons of payload. So I feel like that might be where they have the wiggle room, in addition to possibly that whole thermal sink argument as well. So that's kind of an interesting interesting conversation to have there. SpaceX has also confirmed on X that they are T-minus 30 minutes away. This was a few minutes ago. So this tracks that they are on track right now for liftoff in just under 30 minutes right now, currently sitting at a little over 27 minutes. So again, keeping good pace here on tonight's Starlink mission. Continue to watch that propellant condensation on the first stage liquid oxygen tank. You'll watch that continue to grow over the next couple of minutes. We got some nice wide shots there of the Cape Canaveral area. Is that 39B we're looking at right now? That looks to me like 39B.
Yeah, I think so, right? But I'm no Cape expert.
That was an A.
That was
Okay,
A.
I was confused because I had the lightning masts. But yeah, interesting. See, so I'm going to pass this off to you, Julia, because this is discussing booster flight cadences, or not cadences, but I guess milestones. So they're saying that this is going to be flight 18 of this booster, 1062. Are there any others that are close to 20 that you think are going to break that magic number before this booster does? Do you have any guesses? I know I think the early 60s are all around 18 flights. Do you have any guesses as to who's going to get past there first?
I think 1061. I had to think a little bit about that. I think, yeah, it's either going to be 60 or 61 because poor 58. And I still think we'll see that maybe, gosh, we're already February, March, April. By the end of April? Have a 20th flight? That's my guess.
Now. Wow. I'm very excited for that mission there. I mean, that's a major milestone. SpaceX has been working towards that magic number. And of course, they want to try to get beyond there now, see how far they can take these boosters and get their investment out of them. So yeah, very cool to see there. Thank you for the question there, Joe. We have some more support coming in over the past few minutes. We've had a new pad rep member from RK, as well as Julia here has become a pad rep member. Not Julia Bergeron, but Julia Mulvihill here. So thank you, Julia, for that. And Nikki has become a Red Team member. So thank you to all of you for supporting us through the membership program. Let's see here. Kanan Copeland here is asking, I'm going to give this to you, Adrian. And I probably can hear Max already yelling into the microphone. What circumstances for a launch would facilitate the use of a stubby nozzle on the second stage?
Well, if you need a little bit less, so stubby nozzle is a bit less performance than non-stubby. However, first off, I want to shout out our NSF Live today because we had Tom Euler on there who gave a very detailed opinion about stubby nozzle, which far exceeds anything I can say smart about it. But in general, stubby nozzle basically uses less expensive materials and less less production chain or limited materials. So you're in a situation where if you don't need the performance, if you don't need to min-max everything out of your second stage, you can use a stubby nozzle to save some money to enable them to launch so much, because producing a Merlin vac is apparently quite expensive otherwise. So that's your short answer. And since Starlinks are kinda pushing the capabilities of Falcon 9, they are not really a candidate for stubby.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of funny we got this question because like you said, we have some very pertinent news from, the guy who led the design of this engine. And yeah, he gave us a lot of great information. Again, if you have not checked out today's NSF Live with Tom Mueller himself, so the man who was in charge of all of propulsion of SpaceX for several years and now is the CEO of Impulse Space, moving large payloads around in space rather than up into space. Be sure to check out today's NSF Live after today's live stream. That was, in my opinion, exceptional. That was one of the best that we've done so far. And I'm going to need to rewatch it because that was just incredible. So much great information from Tom Mueller there today.
I'm going to say that I haven't gotten to watch it because I was at work. But y'all, the amount of geeking out that the NSF team was doing during this stream certifiably means this is a good episode.
Oh, the back channel was absolutely chaotic. It was incredible what we saw today.
And that's I have to say, talking to people who are so smart, and I mean, like, these engineers working on these rockets are very, very, very smart about this, and especially Tom Mueller, of course. Like, it's so cool to pick their brain about things, because we sometimes have situations where we ask ourselves, why is that? And being able to ask a insanely qualified person, why is that, and get like a reasonable and like a detailed answer. That's just the best. That's just the highlight.
Yeah, I honestly think we might need to make a document and write down all the bit of information that he gave us, because he dispelled so many myths, but also gave us so much good information. I think we just need to write it all down so we can keep track of it. That was yeah.
We should just do a video of everything we learned from talking with Tom Mueller.
That'd be a great.
I agree. You guys should do that.
Thank you. Right. It's probably would be and then we would just upload the whole NSF Live, and it's just the same video again. Just watch it.
Re-upload the video. Oh, that's great. We have some more support coming in for you from Bideford, someone we see here all the time, has gifted 10 Red Team memberships. Thank you for that. All the support you've given so far. And they did say that the gifted memberships today are in honor of their son's birthday, Steven, yesterday. So happy birthday, Steven, a little bit belated. But yeah, what a great birthday present, kind of giving back to the community on behalf of Bideford's son. So happy birthday, Steven. Thank you, Bideford, for your support as always. Mike O has become a Pad Rat member, and RC Horseman has gifted 5 Red Team memberships. So thank you to all of you for all that support here tonight. All right. Let's see. So we talked a bit about scrubs here. Cooper Schultz here is asking, do we know the cost of a scrub? Adrian, are there any numbers published? If not, what's the deal with a scrub? What do we have to do during a scrub? What do you think generally the costs would be?
Okay, so I will, first off, there will probably not be a number here, because that depends on a lot of factors. And let's talk about these factors. First off, it means how much can you recycle of your propellant, right? Because scrubbing means saving the vehicle. So you're trying to save liquid oxygen, you're pumping back your RP1, because usually you're not just venting out huge amounts of RP1. That would be weird. That's not happening. So that's the first thing you do. You would recycle your propellants. That's the first cost you're talking about. That's probably something you can get in terms of ballpark. But however, as we are also approaching the T-20 minute vent here, which is part of the propellant loading here, and we're reaching that milestone here, which means everything is on track so far for a nominal liftoff at 8:10 today Eastern time. So there's also other parts here that go into the cost of a scrub, because you suddenly have a situation where you have a ship out there in the ocean, right? So you need to make sure to either that will delay, that will have to be out there more, which has some costs attached to it. You also have to delay launches. So it's a multi-layered question, but in general, we are probably talking about a non-significant amount of money for scrub, which most of the costs are more in the fact that you can launch less and less about just the pure propellant alone.
Got it. Thank you, Adrian. And yeah, you mentioned the T-20 minute event that shows that. Adrian, could you give us an overview of what this event's happening here? What does this signify in the countdown?
Yeah, absolutely. So the second stage first loads RP1, and this is basically the wrapping up of the RP1 on the second stage, since it doesn't load both propellants at the same time. And now they have started the LOX, or they're preparing to start the LOX loading on the second stage, which will commence at 16 minutes before T0.
Cool. Thank you very much. And he asked me going for a few minutes, and we see this resume kind of like a few minutes prior to T0 just to kind of flush everything out. So we're going to see kind of another T-minus 20-minute vent, but not at T-minus 20-minute vent. Let's see. Question here. Interesting question. While we're getting into the countdown here, from Kanan here. And Adrian, I'm going to throw this to you because you have a lot of kind of insight into these operations. So we're giving, like, for Starbase, how do we send people down there? And what was your experience like down in Starbase? Was it doing like a lot of work? What did you kind of do down there? I think it's kind of an interesting kind of personal question to ask here. I know it's not really Starlink, but just what's your experience down like in Starbase?
So I'm neither a photographer nor I'm a technical person, so I was mostly used there for carrying things around, which I tried my best to help with. There are other people that go there way more often, who have a technical background and who can help there with cameras, with equipment, with everything. So they are more often there, and that makes sense. It's an amazing thing to do if you have time and you have like a window to go to Starbase. I highly recommend it. It's definitely something I would recommend for everybody to see, especially if there's a rocket on the pad. It's magical. It depends basically to answer the question in general here. It depends on who we need right now in Starbase, and then based on that, we have people at Starbase.
Yeah, and like around launches, we'll have, a lot more people down there, right, than we typically would, like, say, right now while we're getting prepped for a launch, I guess.
Yeah, of course. You would closer to a launch have more people around because more equipment, more opportunities, for example, to photograph a rocket. So that of course plays with it. But yeah, overall, who we need there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that. I of course, that question is not really related to Falcon or Starlink, but I thought it was kind of neat to bring in kind of the personal, in-person perspective as to what we do down in Starbase. I have a question for you, Julia. Here, River Dave is asking. So we know the 4 towers at Pad 40, Pad 41. Why are there not 4 towers here at Pad 39A? Why don't we need those here, Julia?
Well, we don't need those there because on the tower is actually a lightning rod of its own. So that is grounded just like the towers would be with the wires. But they just use that single tower, and it worked for shuttle. So heck, it's going to work for Falcon and Falcon Heavy.
And we haven't seen a lightning rod go up on the top of the Starship Tower, right? We haven't seen anything like that yet?
No, actually we haven't, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because, well, let's put it this way. Florida is one of the lightning capitals of the world. So as far as lightning strikes go, we typically have more than Texas. So that could be part of what plays into that. But yeah, it is kind of surprising they don't have one at Texas because you do have a giant tower. And as you can see, we don't have on our Starship Tower, we don't have a lightning rod on that either. My assumption would be because the rod at 39A would probably take most of any attracting of said lightning, but I might have to ask a weather friend these questions and come back to you in my next stream with hopefully an answer.
Yeah, and you mentioned this, the Florida Tower, which is what I was alluding to, and it makes me wonder, maybe the tower itself is supposed to be the lightning rod. Maybe it's specifically grounded to act as a rod. I don't know if that's really possible or something. But yeah, maybe there's a possibility there, and I'm curious to see if they add one in the future as they get closer to operations. And speaking of 4 towers, of course, so 39A is missing its 4 towers, but if you're missing your own 4 towers, head on over to shop.nasaspaceflight.com. We have a fun little 4 towers lightning shirt. It's a nice little pun related to the 4 towers to celebrate your kind of insider knowledge into spaceflight, everything that you know about the operations down in Florida. So, of course, there's not just that 4 towers merch. So there are metal prints, of course, other Falcon 9 designs, the launch, reentry, and landing. That's one of my favorite designs, actually. I need to pick up one one of those shirts. We have a lot of good stuff over on shop.nasaspaceflight.com, and it's a great way to support the work that we do. And there's that design I'm talking about right there. I got to pick that up sometime soon because I love the simplicity of that one. So thank you, River Dave, for that question. That was a nice discussion that we had there. Dunwell, let's see here. Question here from Dunwell. Adrian, I'm going to toss this to you. So we've already launched a lot of Starlink satellites between the V1.5. Now we're getting into V2.0 on the Group 6 and Group 7. How many more Starlinks do we need to launch? Or is it just like several tens of thousands or several thousands at this point?
So let me. So in Group 5 and 6 combined, there will be 3,360 planned satellites. And so far operational, they have about 1,500. So alone in this group, they will probably need to launch about 1,800 more. And overall, we are talking about 22,000. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Alex. But I think it's about 20,000 for the. Basically the Group 5 and 6 they are launching right now is 3,360, and so far they have 1,500 in orbit. Full constellation is 29,989. There we go.
Ooh, that's a lot. All right,
yep.
And they have 7,200 approved.
Yep.
Interesting, and I'm curious to see how Starship will begin to play into that too. Like how many Starship satellites versus how many Falcon 9 satellites. It's that's still a mind-boggling number. That is like multiple magnitudes, I believe, or like multiple times the amount of satellites that have been in orbit before Starlink. So that's a lot of satellites right there.
I read that recently. Like even the transporter missions of SpaceX, even if you only count these and ignore everything Starlink, even these transporter missions have a significant amount of the overall launched satellites of humanity. Like they're like in the 25% range. So even these are already making up a significant chunk of what we have launched in terms of individual satellites. And then you get into Starlink, and that just makes everything else obsolete in terms of numbers and in terms of how many satellites we have in orbit.
Yeah, that's it's crazy just how much it's grown because of Falcon 9's launch rate. I mean, they're trying to get down to multiple launches per week now, and it's getting to the point where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this seemed completely crazy to even think about, and now it's just regular day-to-day operations.
I mean, we are talking about a rocket that is close to its 300th launch, which is just a few flights away, and might just reach 400 flights this year.
Wow. Falcon 9 is just becoming the world's workhorse rocket. I mean, it's plain and simple. Again, we're getting to a point where we've just never seen something like this happen before. I mean, the closest was maybe the Space Shuttle or Atlas Centaur. But now Falcon 9 is just absolutely accelerating even past those. Great question right there. And Alex, actually, clarifying, this is the 292nd orbital flight by Falcon 9. So we are dangerously close to 300, and we'll probably hit that in February at some point. So that's going to be a very historic month right there for SpaceX.
Absolutely.
XBAR. So this question about booster refurbishment, Adrian. So XBAR is asking, do we know why 1062 was inactive for so long? So what could cause this, or is it just, any number of factors and we don't really know exactly?
I think we don't really know and get a full amount of insight of why they actually why this was super delayed. It usually it tends to happen a bit more with higher flight counts, where you of course increase inspections and everything, and you make sure that you're still fine, especially if you're boundary pushing. So that's probably related to it, but we don't get a complete overview. Also, just to point this out, it was just a turnaround about 62 days, so it's not like it was out for a year. It was just a bit longer, which again feels a bit normal with a booster that is basically joining the most flown boosters of the fleet.
I mean, the thing too is like it's getting up there in terms of flights. There might be a bit more, refurbishment and inspections necessary at this point. But 1062 has currently, and it still holds the record for quickest turnarounds between flights. I think it was only 9 days of refurbishment, but then 21 days of actual between launch to launch. So they can get down between those. They can get down to like very low numbers, and. Yeah, I mean, they've proven they can get down to low turnaround numbers on these vehicles, especially this vehicle right here. Thank you for that question, X-Bar. Kanan here, I have a question. This is going to go for you, Julia. So there's a question regarding Cape Canaveral, I guess, history and naming schemes. So we're looking at pad 39A right now. Are there really over 39 pads there, Julia? Or like, what do those numbers mean? Is there any significance to those?
Well, fun fact, they don't, if you look at a map, the numbers do not necessarily go in any particular order either. There's streaks where it does kind of align when you're over at 12, 13, 14, and then it skips. We go to 16, 19, and 20 are all on what we would call missile row. By the way, if you hear background noise, excuse the tourists. We have a lot of people out for launch tonight, especially on US 1 where I am. But back to the story. The tip of Cape where we started with our first launches, you do have a cluster 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the neighboring pad is actually Blue Origin at Launch Complex 36. So are there really 39? No, there are not. 39A and B are unique to KSC. So those are operated specifically by Kennedy Space Center. And the other are all operated by the Space Force. So if you're occupying, we'll say 16, 19, 14, which will soon be Stoke Space, 20, 36, all of our commercial partners are actually leasing from Cape Canaveral, whereas SpaceX would be leasing
Julia,
a pad from Kennedy Space Center at 39A.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, you're going a little bit robotic there on the connection. We got most of that through, but thank you for that answer there, Julia. Adrian, or actually real quick before we get to that, so we've just passed T-minus 7 minutes in the countdown. I wanted to give a quick update here. Still seem to be go for launch right now. They now are getting into engine chill. So now they're beginning to flow a small amount of RP1 and liquid oxygen through the different components of the engine to slowly begin to chill them down ahead of launch. You don't want to have to thermally shock your engines, similar to, why you can't pour boiling hot water onto a glass plate. It'll shatter. And the same thing with metal components in an engine. If you start pumping liquid oxygen through after it's sitting, in the 60-degree Florida weather, it'll shatter or at least damage your metal components. So they begin to slowly trickle these propellants through, starting around right now, to begin to chill them down to flight temperatures there. So that's something we're looking at right now. We're just under 6 minutes away from liftoff here. It seems to be on track right now for a liftoff at 8:10 p.m. Eastern time. We got a bit more support here coming through from Ryan. They've gifted 1 Red Team membership to the community. Thank you for that. David Spector also has gifted 1 Red Team membership. And Gary has become their own Red Team member. So thank you, all 3 of you, for supporting us through the membership program. And Angry American here with a $2 super chat saying there's 7,000 watching. There's actually about 13,000 watching right now. There's only 1.1 thousand likes. So yeah, thank you, Angry American. And, it's a great way to support the work that we do. People say it all the time on YouTube because it works. Hit that like button, yada, yada, algorithm, the drill. It's a great way to support us that, requires no money from you. And it helps the algorithm gods to be more happy with us. So, Adrian, I'm going to give you this question right here as we're getting closer to the countdown. We're going to begin to wrap things up and start focusing solely on the launch here. But they're asking in terms of Starlink, is it planned for only low Earth orbit right now, or are there any talks to send Starlink to cislunar or interplanetary space? Have you heard anything about that?
We have, there's always some talk about where you could maybe use them. There's also been some repurpose of Starlink with, for example, Starshield, where you had use the platform and use it for something else. But as of now, they are not really in a situation where like we have like a planned constellation on Mars or something. Like that's not happening so far. However, I do want to point out something here, which I feel like we need to point out here. Which don't panic yet, but apparently the scheduled X stream of SpaceX has been deleted, which has been a sign of scrub in the past. We don't confirm a scrub yet. We wait for the launch provider to confirm such a scrub. But it's just an indicator we still want to communicate with you all, because it could mean that something maybe is going on here. We'll see. We're standing by. The biggest indicator in a bit would be the T-2 minute vent, which we would expect in 2 minutes.
We also should see the strong back retraction happening right about now. So if we keep an eye out for that, that would be an indicator either way. Oh, and Alex is saying it is retracting. So that's a good potential sign right there that we're continuing. Also, again, keep in mind, everyone, it is very windy out there in Cape Canaveral. We don't know. We actually mentioned it a bit earlier in the webcast. We don't know the exact wind speed limits that SpaceX is sticking at for these missions, or that Falcon 9 is required to stay within, but it could be potentially exceeding those. Again, we don't know an exact insight into what the decision-making process is here, but that's kind of what we're seeing here on the ground tonight.
Yes, and just like as, for example, Chris B says here, it could also be that, for example, the X platform has some issues. We just want to like still convey the information because, well, it's part of what's happening right now, and we'll see. Like in 3 minutes, we will know what's the actual situation here.
Yeah, exactly. There's no guarantees either way. We just want to pass that information along, so you know as much as we do. Let's see. So, Adrian, going back to the question real quick, do we have any plans to send Starlink beyond Earth right now? Just a real quick question.
So far, there's not been a deep announcement of like Starlink going, for example, to cislunar space. But you never know. I think it's not something that I would call unlikely.
Got it.
For example, like we have heard Elon talk about moon-based alpha in the past. Well, if you want to have like a constant relay to the moon, why not use these very proven communication satellites, right?
Yeah, I mean it's architecture you have already, and of course going to the moon or to Mars, you'll have. And there we go. We have the roughly T-2 minute vent here.
So just to point out another thing here. Because you would think that means, they're still on countdown, right? They could go to T-minus 30 seconds, which they had done in the past, where they basically...
Adrian, sorry to cut you off, but the stream is back up on X, so...
Oh, there we go.
Sounds good.
So it was X. So we're good.
Beautiful. Yeah, just a nice little accent. So coming up here, T-minus 1 minute. We're going to see a lot coming up here in the last few seconds prior to launch. So we're going to see the propellant tanks pressurize up to their flight pressures. 45 seconds. The SpaceX launch director is going to give the go for launch, and at this point, the vehicle is going to take over control of the countdown on its own computers. So we should be seeing that happening over the next few minutes. We got some nice live shots here from the pad at 39A. Again, seems like we're still pushing for a launch right now. You see venting beginning to close up on the transporter and the vehicle. They're flushed of all of their propellants, all clean, all safe, ready for liftoff. Past T-minus 30 seconds here. We have the go for launch tonight of Falcon 9. Getting some final venting here prior to liftoff. T-minus 25 seconds. Getting some launch audio piped in. Now we're going to be quiet right after liftoff so you can enjoy that launch audio. We're going to see you coming up on max Q about a minute and a half into launch. So coming up here at T-minus 10 seconds, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the audio of today's countdown. You can see sound suppression is active. Engine ignition. And liftoff. The first Starlink launch from Pad 39A this year. Falcon 9 taking another 23 satellites into low Earth orbit. Now we're going to sit back here and enjoy the launch audio as it begins to come through. We'll see you all on the other side. All right, and we are just past T plus 1 minute into count. You can hear that incredibly loud launch audio, so loud it set off some car alarms out there at the press site. It's always a fun sight to see. I mean, out there at the press site, you're only a few miles away from the pad. We're going through max Q right now. You see some nice shock cones coming out there in front of the rocket as the vehicle goes supersonic. Again, that was some very loud launch audio. Even Julia saying in the back channel that was very loud from the mainland. So great to hear that. Now, over
And
the next
is through max Q.
Yep. Now we'll begin to see over the next few minutes, next few seconds, the plumes of the engines begin to expand and get wider and wider. That's because you're getting higher and higher in Earth's atmosphere, and there's less pressure up there, so your exhaust has more room to expand and fan out. It also get a bit dimmer, like what you're seeing here. Gonna get some gorgeous deep reds and blues, hints of purple in there. It's a very, very pretty moment in launch here. Now
There's the space view.
There we go. Some nice
Oh,
onboard shots.
Not yet space view. Soon to be space view.
Yeah, a little under halfway to space view. Now, the next thing we're going to be looking out for here in just about 20 seconds is main engine cutoff. So we're going to see those 9 engines shut down, followed shortly after by stage separation, then second stage engine ignition. So keep an eye out here. We're going to see what we get from the ground and onboard camera shots. There's a shot from inside the interstage looking up into the Merlin vacuum engine nozzle. And there we have stage separation. Getting gorgeous shots there of the coast of Florida as well. You can see, I think it's Orlando there just to the left of the engine. And we have engine ignition there. Left fairings. Oh, there we go. We got some shots from the ground there from Max of the MVAC firing. You see the plume, because so high up in space, the plume is expanding dramatically. And some great first stage shots there as well.
And there's the Starlinks.
There we go, all 23, and there goes the fairing.
Oh, that looks beautiful.
Oh, that is incredible. That looks like a waterfall right there. See,
yeah, right?
Oh, this is not a jellyfish. Of course, a jellyfish would look much more dynamic, but that is still beautiful. I love seeing this portion of launch right there. It's so bright. And Julia's saying on the ground she can still see it burning bright from mainland near Titusville. Now, this is going to continue for about another 5 minutes. We're going to see the second stage keep firing to put the Starlinks into a low Earth orbit. It'll park there for a little bit, and in about 40 minutes after that, they will ignite for a second burn. But right now, we're going to focus on the first burn, as the first stage also continues down to the drone ship. So, Adrian, we got a few things coming up on the first stage here. What are we looking forward to in terms of first stage landing milestones today? What do we got going on?
So, in about 2 minutes, the first stage entry burn will begin. Where it will use some propellant to slow itself down before hitting the spicy part of the atmosphere. That burn is about 23 seconds, and after that, it will basically perform a aerodynamic fall until 8 minutes and 5 seconds into flight, where it will ignite once again for one engine and start its landing burn. And then hopefully at 8 minutes and 37 seconds, that's what we would expect the touchdown on a shortfall of gravitas. So these are the first stage milestones coming up.
Awesome. And this will mark the 18th. So the first stage has already completed its 18th launch. We are now waiting to see its 18th landing. And again, it's now coasting. It just passed apogee right now. It's beginning to come back down, just above the Kármán line, around 110, 115 kilometers up. All looks to be going well so far on this mission.
Absolutely. I always love, I don't know why, but I always love these dangling cables in 0G. There's something about them that I love.
It's funny. It seems so janky, because it's like, oh, there's just loose cables and hoses. Like what those are. Those are vent hoses from the Merlin vacuum engine. It's funny seeing those loosely in the interstate. You're like, that seems very those just burn right off or something. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have to replace those between launches. But it's fun to see those kind of wiggling around inside the interstage. And we're still getting tracking shots from mainland Cape Canaveral here. Great to see that. It's from the press side, I should say, but still great to see that we have good shots here of the second stage engine. Now we're going to be coming up on that first stage entry burn here, coming up in a few seconds. We got an onboard shot on the left-hand side of your screen. Oh, some up-close shots here. That is the entry burn of the first stage.
Yeah, you can see basically like
Wow.
how it goes like engine first here.
Yeah, the plume is going upwards. You can totally tell it's falling back. That's
almost like a shooting
marvelous.
star.
It pretty much is, yeah. It's a very slow meteorite, or meteor. Oh, with my shots of the pad right there after a great start to today's mission. And we have entry burn shut down. So now the first stage is going to coast through the bottommost third of the atmosphere on its way back to the drone ship.
Yep, about 35 kilometers to go.
Keep an eye on those grid fins there. You can see a little bit of re-entry heating building up on those. Always great to see that on these night launches.
Yeah, you can see the plasma forming.
Yeah. Those titanium grid fins, those are very heat resistant, so they are absolutely built to hold up against this heating that we're getting here. It's always great to see that building up on these. Again, Starlink is really pushing Falcon 9 to its absolute limits here, so you're going to see a lot more heating on these missions than, say, a return to launch site or a Cargo Dragon mission, for instance.
And we are about 30 seconds away from the landing burn.
There's a light we're seeing. It just got blocked by the grid fin there on the left-hand side of that first stage screen. I'm wondering if that's one of the support ships out there lit up in the ocean, or maybe that's even the drone ship itself.
Could be, right?
Very curious right there. Oh, Alex is saying, yeah, that's the drone ship. That makes sense.
So it has the target.
Yep, and we're coming up a few seconds from now on the landing burn. That'll be a single engine starting up on the first stage. That is enough to slow it down perfectly to a pinpoint landing on the drone ship, just a few seconds away from now. And that second stage, meanwhile, of course, that's the primary mission today. That is continuing to burn on the right-hand side of the screen. Get some little signal losses here, not too uncommon on these missions here. It's a very dynamic portion of today's flight.
And
but first stage,
comes the drone ship.
Legs deployed, and touchdown. That's the 18th landing today of Booster 1062. It's now become Booster 1062-19. So they're going to be bringing this back to Port Canaveral over the next few days and get it ready for its 19th flight coming up probably in about 2 months or so. Meanwhile, the second stage is continuing to burn right now on its way almost into a parking orbit. And it looks like we've had a SECO 1 or second stage engine cutoff right there.
Just as expected.
Beautiful. Now, that's going to conclude the primary portion of today's mission. There's going to be a relight of that second stage in around 30 to 40 minutes. Then they're going to push it out into its final deployment orbit of Starlink. However, like I mentioned, that's still a little while out from right now. So it's going to bring us towards the end of our live stream right now. I'd like to thank everyone for all their support today, including Coco here, who just came in about a few minutes ago during launch. With the one gifted Red Team membership. So thank you, Coco. We appreciate your support there, as well as everyone else who has supported on today's mission. Now, as Doss likes to say, we're looking out at Pad 39A after another successful launch here. This was the first launch. This was the first launch of Starlink from Pad 39A since September of last year. So this is very much a rarity. So we saw a bit of a treat here today. Adrian, do we know what's next for 39A? I know that we just had the Axiom 3 mission a few days ago, but do we know what's next for 39A? Is it a crew? I believe
it should be the IM-1 mission, the Nova C mission, if I recall correctly here, which should come around mid-February.
You're right. I remember.
Yes, and right after that, at about 8 days later, it would be Crew 8. So it will go from here to Nova C, and from there to Crew 8. So that's the manifest here for 39A.
I remember we had a bit of a confusion because it seemed like Crew 8 and IM-1 Nova C were kind of like fighting for who gets to fly from 39A first. But yeah, as of right now, February 14th at 1:45 a.m., Nova C is launching from Pad 39A. And this is going to be a really fun one, actually. I want to take a moment to just look forward a little bit at Nova C. This is not your ordinary lunar lander where you have, either a monopropellant or if you have hydrazine and nitrous tetroxide, hypergolics. This is very different. This is a cryogenic moon lander. So it's landing with methalox, liquid methane and liquid oxygen. And that means that they can't load it up in the payload processing facility. So Adrian, what's happening with that? How are they doing it different? How are they loading it on this mission?
Well, they will, to my knowledge, load it on the pad, right? Because that's the only reason, the situation they have here right now. Basically on the fairing, kinda.
Yeah, so they're loading cryogenics in through the fairing, which I don't think it's really happened before ever.
It's also one of these things where you like really get to notice like fairings are underrated, right? Because fairings are like sometimes they just feel like, oh, it's like this wrap I have around my satellites. Fairings provide like so many capabilities. They are like they in this case they are helping to reuse them. They have so many technology going into these fairings, which are maybe not always getting like the highest amount of attention in the public because, well, they're not rocket engines. But I think fairings are cool.
Yeah, really. And I mean, also not only is Nova C going to have a strange kind of fairing circumstance where it's loading cryogenics through the fairing, Cygnus on NG20, which will be launching in just a few days, January 30th, so 2 days from right now, from Pad 40, so just about a mile south of here. That has a custom hatch on the fairing, so a lot of cool fairing things happening right now. That's something to keep an eye on over the next few days. Now, I think it's going to bring us to the end of our live stream here. I'd like to thank, of course, everyone who supported us, the super chats, the tips, store messages. We didn't see any store messages here today, but again, shop.nasaspaceflight.com. It's a great way to support the work that we do here, as well as everyone who's joined our membership program, who's gifted memberships back to the community and asked questions, of course, in chat. It's a very, like we mentioned, it's a rare treat to see a Starlink from 39A tonight, so we're glad that we were able to bring that to all of you. Now, looking ahead, the next Falcon 9 mission is from Vandenberg. That's later tonight. We will not be covering that. But you can come back now to, in 2 days, we will have Cygnus CRS-20 from Pad 40 in Cape Canaveral. So come back in 2 days for another launch of Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral. But that's going to bring us to the end for tonight's mission. I'd like to thank you, all of you, for watching and tuning in as always, all of your support. And I'd also like to thank my co-host. Thank you, Adrian, for helping with your expertise here tonight.
Thanks for having me. And I want to just quickly update here that Vandenberg has delayed further into the window. And with that, we will not get a turnaround record today.
Oh, well. All right. That sucks to hear, but there's always more opportunities. They hope to target 448 launches this year, so there's always more opportunities for that. Julia as well. I don't know if you're still on comms here with us, but thank you for tuning in, giving us some of your knowledge on the marine assets launching tonight. I don't believe we still have Julia on comms, but either way, thank you for that. As well as Patrick Cahoon operating in the studio, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, as Jack likes to say, and keeping this stream afloat. And of course, we had Max Evans out in the field tracking the launch tonight. You can see the replay. Again, that's a replay on screen right now of tonight's launch. Max with his excellent tracking as always. And for tonight, I have been your host, Ian Atkinson, reporter and writer with NASA Spaceflight. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to see you in a few days coming up on NG20. If you're not, if you want to see some more Space Coast live streams, we have our 24/7 Space Coast live stream up right now. Gets you some live shots of 39A, live shots of Port Canaveral, and any other cool activities happening around the Space Coast. So don't worry if you don't want to leave us right now, but we're going to end our hosted commentary here for tonight. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you for another launch. Have a good night, y'all, and have a great week.
And here we go.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off. Say again, SPD off. Off. It's orange! Orange 45! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! What is it? Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?